This is Day to Day with St. Joseph. What about these stories of Joseph and his blooming staff, as depicted here in this famous artwork, and depicted again in this other one? Why do we have this if history doesn't have a definite proof that it ever happened? On Thursday, April the 29th, on our program, we just wonder, legendary, pious, or what? These stories in the Bible. We even take the stories of creation, the stories of Noah's Ark, and how are we being taught to faith through stories? And what about the parables of Jesus? Are these explanations without actually historical fact all backing it up, or a real situation? Or are they real but just not pinpointed? So we have the fact that God wanted Joseph to be wed to Mary. Okay? We have Mary picked out from the start for her to be the one full of grace, entered into the world, and then she becomes the mother of the Christ. God had a plan. Book of Revelation even shows all of that, more than a dream in God's mind in the heavens, but all figured out as his way of redeeming the world, and through his coming to the world through a woman. And then there's a man involved in the story too, which is Joseph. So God's going to make that happen, though Mary and Joseph freely are going to be very fond of one another and loving toward each other and very respectful of the common faith and the depth of that faith that they both have, and this amazing parallel agreement that they have to serve God, met in a marriage, but mostly to raise the Christ and to serve his mission. And so there are other stories that involve Mary and like how she was born, which again doesn't have a biblical account. How is she born immaculate? How is she born free from sin? Now we understand the reason is that Christ would need to be born in grace. He would have to be born in a womb that did not have original sin. So all that's figured out by people like St. Augustine. But what about, then how did Mary get into the world? And now we don't even have stories about that, really. I haven't heard one of how Mary comes into the world and just born of Joachim and Anne. I've never really heard such a story, but there may be one out there to try to explain. It's like early man back in the time of Moses being described the creation story in the 7 days. It worked. Moses understood, the people understood. They got a picture of the star of the world that they needed to get. Did they need all the description of the time periods and ice ages and dinosaurs and cavemen and other things going out and on in the universe? No, they didn't need to know any of that. And so the story suffices. Well, I'm going to give you a story that was written about St. Joseph from Brothers Grimm, just as an example of how a saint can be used in a story that is really all in the imagination of its author. I'm going to provide to you an example of a legendary story, okay? The Legend of St. Joseph in the Forest by the Grimm brothers, okay? So just gather around the fireplace and listen to the story. Well, I'm going to do a short version of the Grimm brothers' tale, and I have found it since, The Legend of St. Joseph in the Forest by Grimm Brothers. I have found it on YouTube, It's 7 minutes long, so I'm going to save it for tomorrow for you to see the original. And now I'm just going to give you a very abbreviated version of the tale, but I'm going to tell it from how I remember it. I remember the story is about 3 daughters and a mother, and they live in a cottage. And it's a story of the 3 daughters going off into the forest near their property. And the oldest daughter goes off first. And she encounters somebody, and we find out it's Saint Joseph. And in that encounter, she presents herself as the kind of person that she really is. And I would suppose that she has carried the memory of her good Christian father with her. And Saint Joseph helps rekindle some of that life, the influence of her father on her visit. She goes home with a gift that Saint Joseph has given to her to take back. When she goes back, the mother sees it only in a material way and decides to send a more favorite second daughter out into the woods, and maybe this person giving things away will give something better away. So she sends her daughter into the forest. Again, not a really safe place, a mysterious place, but she sends her in, but with pancakes and things to woo the giver, the strange figure in the forest. And so off the girl goes. And when she goes, she reveals her own character, which is lesser than the first girl. But she manages to have the encounter too with St. Joseph. And then St. Joseph gives her a gift, and she comes home with it. The mother's very pleased, for the gift seems to be better than the first one. And she always looking at everything materially, and she says, I think I'll send my third daughter in to the forest. And the youngest one goes into the forest and encounters again this white-haired gentleman, St. Joseph, in his cottage. But this girl is much like the mother, pretty self-centered person, and the encounter is so different than the first daughter's encounter, at least from the point of view of how St. Joseph gets treated. And yet he still has her stay at the cottage, have a meal, and a conversation, and then the girl goes off home. But when she goes off home, she's met with great disappointment by the mother and can't believe that the youngest one didn't get the best prize. And so the mother decides that she's going to stomp back into the forest with her youngest daughter, and she's going to get the fair share, not the fair share, get the greedy prize that she expected from this old man they're taking advantage of in his charity. And she goes into the forest, and she meets her end along with the youngest daughter. And these fairy tales, whether it's Hansel and Gretel or one of the many other Grimm brothers stories, legends, they have a lesson in it. Sometimes they're pretty striking lessons, but there's a lesson to be told. And St. Joseph is in the story, and you'll hear that it was appropriate that they use St. Joseph as the figure that they visit. Well, I'll see you tomorrow when we do the Brothers Grimm, got it right that time, story in its entirety. And as we just talk about the use of St. Joseph in storytelling, and how it works to our advantage, or it works to our purposes as we go through this year of St. Joseph.